Think about the last time a woman screaming at a nurse in a hospital corridor made you want to pull out your phone and call your mother. Terms of Endearment landed in theaters in December of 1983 and turned a mother-daughter relationship into the most devastating 2 hours in a multiplex. Part tearjerker, part dark comedy, part character study, so specific it felt like someone had been watching your family. Shirley MacLaine led as Aurora Greenway, a Houston widow, so controlling she checked on her newborn daughter in the middle of the night just to make sure the child was still breathing. And if the child was breathing fine, she woke her up anyway, just in case. Debra Winger was Emma, the daughter who spent 30 years trying to love a woman who was impossible to love and impossible to leave. Jack Nicholson played Garrett Breedlove, the retired astronaut next door, all swagger and bad habits and unzipped hoodies, and, at the end, something that looked a lot like Grace. Danny DeVito played Vernon, one of Aurora's baffled suitors, a man so outgunned by the situation he barely registers as a human being. And Jeff Daniels played the husband nobody liked, including the audience, which was the entire point of Jeff Daniels in this film. Directed by first-timer James L. Brooks and produced by Paramount Pictures, Terms of Endearment cost $8 million and made $165 million worldwide, becoming the second highest grossing film of 1983. Only Return of the Jedi beat it. It swept the 56th Academy Awards with 5 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Brooks won 3 of them in one night: Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. He is one of only 6 directors in Oscar history to win Best Director on their debut feature. The others include Delbert Mann for Marty, and Robert Redford for Ordinary People. It is, by any measure, a short list. Today we're climbing back into that world for 15 facts you didn't know. The Oscar winner who came out of retirement, commissioned the film, and never appeared in a single frame. The actress who held the most powerful position in Hollywood and then walked away from it completely. The phone call that changed everything, and the rap gift that accidentally created The Simpsons. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into the films that shaped us. Let's get into the countdown with number 15. Number 15, the rap gift that accidentally created The Simpsons. When production wrapped on Terms of Endearment, production designer Polly Platt gave director James L. Brooks a congratulatory present, a collection of life in hell comic strips by a struggling cartoonist named Matt Groening. Brooks stopped at one particular 9-panel strip that cataloged all the ways you could die in Los Angeles. The last 2 panels, failure and success, were the exact same image repeated. That stopped him cold. Platt had been a fan of Groening's work for years. She suggested the meeting, and Brooks agreed to ask Groening to create animated shorts for a new Fox variety show called The Tracy Ullman Show in 1987. Groening arrived at Brooks's office ready to pitch an animated version of his existing work. Then, in the lobby, waiting to go in, he did the math. Animating Life in Hell would mean signing over the rights to his entire life's work. So he sketched a new family on the spot, right there in the waiting room. He named the parents Homer and Marge after his own mother and father. He named the son Bart. He walked into the meeting with a new show on a piece of paper. The Simpsons debuted on December the 17th, 1989. It is now the longest-running primetime scripted series in television history, still running 35 years later. The film that destroyed more people emotionally in 1983 than almost any other is directly responsible for the existence of the world's most beloved cartoon family. Polly Platt gave someone a book. The rest is television history. Number 14. Debra Winger was the 4th choice. The role of Emma, the one Winger was nominated for, the one that broke a generation of viewers, was written for Sissy Spacek. Spacek had just won the Oscar for Coal Miner's Daughter, was fielding offers from every studio in Hollywood, and passed. Brooks then approached Mary Steenburgen, who'd won her own Oscar for Melvin and Howard. The two met. It didn't go well. Next up was Jodie Foster, who turned it down because she was enrolled at Yale and wasn't interrupting her education for a film shoot. After 3 passes from 3 Oscar winners, Paramount suggested Debra Winger, 27 years old. An Officer and a Gentleman had just made $129 million, and she was the hottest dramatic performer in Hollywood. Brooks later said she was the only actress who came in and read the material as a comedy. Everyone else was playing the grief. Winger was playing the life around the grief. That, Brooks said, was the whole thing. The role that made Winger a legend was the fourth choice, and the three women who passed on it would spend the rest of their careers being asked if they regretted it. Jodie Foster enrolled at Yale in September 1983. Terms of Endearment won Best Picture the following April. Foster graduated in 1985 with a degree in literature. No regrets on record. Number 13. Jack Nicholson. Made every take a surprise. MacLaine described it at the American Film Institute. Nicholson's approach to the scene where Garrett answers his front door. Once he did it with a bathrobe on. Once he did it with a woman. Once he showed up barely dressed. Another time he did it as though he'd had a few. Every take, a different Garrett. Every take, MacLaine had to react to someone she hadn't met yet. The bathrobe made the final cut. MacLaine later said the chaos of not knowing what Nicholson would do was the brilliance in working with him, because you could never tell what he was going to bring out in the other actor. It didn't stop at the front door. In the beach convertible scene, Nicholson pulled an unscripted move that caught MacLaine completely off guard. MacLaine confirmed to USA Today it was entirely improvised. The camera got splashed with water during that take. You can see the splash in the finished film. Her reaction was real because she had no idea what was coming. Nicholson told Roger Ebert he had a lot of vanity about showing his stomach in the Renoir painting scene and spent the premiere second-guessing the shot. I was wondering if for my next picture I should play Tarzan, he said. The most spontaneous, unplanned performance in the film was also the one that won the Oscar. Nicholson accepted it in sunglasses, thanked the rock people, and went home. MacLaine, standing next to him all night, never knew which version of him was coming either. Number 12. The Oscar win that took a lifetime. MacLaine's first nomination was 1958 for Some Came Running. Lost to Susan Hayward. She was nominated again for The Apartment in 1960, working with Billy Wilder in a film that won Best Picture, and lost to Elizabeth Taylor, who had nearly died of pneumonia that year, and won on what many observers considered a sympathy vote. MacLaine's line about it became one of the most repeated in Hollywood history. I lost to a tracheotomy. She said it for decades. She said it at dinner parties. She said it to at dinner parties. She said it to journalists. At some point, it became the joke that kept the disappointment manageable. She lost again for Irma La Douce in 1963. Again for The Turning Point in 1977. 4 nominations, 4 losses. By the time Terms of Endearment came around, MacLaine had been watching other people accept that statue since Eisenhower was president. She later said she'd trained herself not to care, which anyone who watched her at the ceremony could tell you was not working. When she finally won on April 9, 1984, her first words were, "I'm gonna cry because this show has been as long as my career." She ended with, "I deserve this," and walked off stage. The line read to some as arrogance. To anyone who'd watched her lose 5 times across 26 years, it read differently. 26 years, 5 nominations. The line that made history was a joke about how long it took. Number 11, Jack Nicholson coached Brooks. All the way to Oscar. The year was 1982. Brooks had never directed a film. Nicholson had already won an Oscar for one. Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and been nominated 4 times before that. Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces, The Last Detail, Chinatown. After each day of shooting, Nicholson would walk up to Brooks and say, "You want to know the best direction you gave today? You want to know the worst direction you gave today?" Brooks let him. He later said he couldn't always tell whether Nicholson was helping or testing him, and that he suspected both. Either way, it worked. At the ceremony, the night Brooks won his first Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, he was in a daze. Nicholson leaned over. 2 words. Go for the triple. Brooks won Best Director, then Best Picture. He became only the 3rd person in Oscar history to win for writing, directing, and producing the same film in one night, on his directorial debut. Nicholson accepted his own Best Supporting Actor award in Dark Sunglasses. His speech thanked all you rock people down at the Roxy and up in the Rockies, and noted that Brooks had written 11 versions of his acceptance speech. He handled his second career. Oscar, Brooks later said, like a veteran soldier. No nerves, no fuss. Number 10. The actress removed from her own comeback. Jennifer Jones won the Oscar for The Song of Bernadette in 1943. By 1979, she hadn't been in a film in 5 years. She and her husband, billionaire art collector Norton Simon, had just optioned Larry McMurtry's novel, and Jones was planning her return, as producer, as star, with Al Pacino alongside her. She had already hired Brooks to write the screenplay. Brooks read it, had what he described as a major emotional reaction, then told Paramount executives he wanted to make the film, but not as a vehicle for any specific actress. He wanted to cast it fresh. In a film comment interview, he was careful about Jones. He called her a fine performer and said she simply wasn't who he envisioned for Aurora. Paramount agreed, bought the rights from Jones and Simon, and handed the project to Brooks entirely. Jones was thanked, then removed. Here's the kicker. The film won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. In his acceptance speech for Best Adapted Screenplay, Brooks thanked Jennifer Jones, Simon by name, on the Oscar stage, in front of the industry that had taken the project away from her. Jones had been 60 years old when she announced the comeback. She lived to 90. She never made another film. The comeback she wagered on became someone else's. She got a thank you in someone else's speech, not another frame. Number 9, John Lithgow, got an Oscar nomination in 5 days. Nobody will say who it was. The actor cast as Sam Burns, the gentle banker who falls for Emma, was fired partway through production, and the identity of that actor has never been confirmed. Lithgow, decades later, was still declining. His answer in a 2014 Hollywood Reporter interview, "I don't tell people who it was out of respect." The leading rumor is George Zunza, based on a casting call some crew members recalled from Lincoln, Nebraska. It has never been confirmed. Lithgow was in the middle of Footloose when Brooks's editor called from Los Angeles. Jeffrey Katzenberg, overseeing both films at Paramount, personally pressured the Footloose director to release him for 5 days. Lithgow later said he arrived knowing only that he'd be playing a married man who falls for Emma, a role that, on the page, could have been sentimental mush. He found the production in open warfare and had no expectation it would be one of the best films ever made. He thought he was doing a quick favor and getting back to Kevin Bacon. What Lithgow understood when he read the role was something the script did quietly. Sam Burns is not a villain. He's a decent man in the wrong situation, and Lithgow played him exactly that way. The nomination wasn't for the romance. It was for the decency underneath it. That's the harder thing to play. He filmed for 5 days. He received an Oscar nomination, one of the few actors in history to earn one for a role shot in under a week. The mystery actor who got fired gave Lithgow that opportunity. Number 8, Debra Winger was secretly in E.T. In 1982, Winger was doing a favor for her friend Steven Spielberg. Sound designer Ben Burt was compositing E.T.'s voice from 16 different sources: raccoons, sea otters, horses, Spielberg himself, Burt's wife sleeping with a cold, a burp from his USC film professor, and Debra Winger. Burt wanted a human voice with warmth, but without the precision of a trained actor, someone who would blur into the blend rather than stand out from it. Winger fit. Her voice is in there somewhere. You just can't separate it from the raccoons. She's also on screen. In the Halloween sequence, a zombie nurse shuffles past E.T. Wig, makeup, completely unrecognizable. That's Winger. The costume was designed specifically so no one would recognize her. On screen for seconds. In the credits for neither. E.T. grossed $435 million worldwide and was the highest-grossing film in history at that point, a record it held for 11 years. Within 18 months, Winger would receive back-to-back Oscar nominations and become the most talked-about dramatic actress in America. But in the summer of 1982, she was a zombie nurse shuffling past a puppet. Uncredited, just doing a friend a kindness. Number 7, the mother-daughter war wasn't just acting. MacLaine wrote about it in her 1995 autobiography, My Lucky Stars, in detail specific enough that Winger, asked about the Wilder stories on television in 2018, could only say, "There's something true in there." MacLaine arrived to set each day in what she called her leftover movie star fur coats to inhabit Aurora, Winger arrived in combat boots and a miniskirt. MacLaine told people, "I thought, oh my goodness." The two women had different working methods, different energies, and different ideas about almost everything, and none of that was resolved. There was a physical confrontation. There was the day MacLaine tried to drive away from the set entirely, and a Paramount staffer had to chase the car down and jump onto it to stop her leaving. Nicholson, watching from the edges, reportedly called it the most interesting set he'd ever worked on. He said it with admiration. Brooks, decades later, called it stormy and said he wouldn't change a thing. He'd been watching two people play a mother and daughter who couldn't stand each other because off camera, they genuinely couldn't stand each other. He told people it felt like when mom and dad are fighting and that kind of frozen feeling you get in the pit of your stomach. What he got from the storm, he said, was two actors hitting it out of the ballpark, and the price of it was the set being as hard as it was. Number 6. Everybody won except Debra Winger. Urban Cowboy, An Officer and a Gentleman, Terms of Endearment, 3 enormous films across 3 years, 2 Oscar nominations, and the most heat of any actress in Hollywood. She spent a week living in Lincoln General Hospital to prepare for the final scenes, pushing through a serious personal crisis throughout the entire production. When it wrapped, she stepped away to recover. Then she sat at the 56th Academy Awards, competing against MacLaine for the same prize, and watched MacLaine win, then watched Brooks win, then watched Nicholson win. Brooks later told people, "Everybody came home with an Oscar except Debra. People were posing with their Oscars, and she sat there posing with an imaginary one." When MacLaine called her turbulently brilliant in the acceptance speech, Winger received a t-shirt the next day that read, "Turbulent means brilliant." Her response to the LA Times, "If it needs an explanation, don't say it." By 1995, Winger was done. She stood on a road in Ireland and announced she was finished. She largely stepped away from the industry, raising her children in New Mexico. A 2002 documentary about Hollywood's treatment of women over 40 was titled Searching for Debra Winger, not a reference to her work, a reference to where she went. Number 5. The Oscar moment that looks different now. At the 56th Academy Awards on April 9, 1984, MacLaine and Winger were both nominated for Best Actress for the same film. MacLaine had been nominated 5 times before without winning. Winger was on her second straight nomination. One of them was Going Home with Nothing, and the smart money, based on everything the season had said, had already decided which one. MacLaine won. Before walking to the stage, she stopped at Winger's seat, leaned down, and reportedly whispered that half the award belonged to her. Then she walked to the stage and delivered 3 minutes and 26 seconds of acceptance speech. Winger can be seen laughing in the audience cutaway. She told the LA Times the laugh was genuine. She found what MacLaine said so irritating it was funny. The presenter who handed MacLaine the Oscar was Rock Hudson. That April night, the audience saw a handsome movie star congratulate a woman who'd been waiting 26 years. What they didn't know was that Hudson was seriously ill. He disclosed his diagnosis publicly that July, making him the first major celebrity in America to do so. A moment that reshaped how the country understood the health crisis of that decade. He died in October 1985. Number 4. Debra Winger dated the governor while filming. During the Lincoln shoot, Winger met Bob Kerrey, governor of Nebraska, Vietnam veteran, Navy SEAL, Medal of Honor recipient, and a man who had lost the lower part of one leg in combat. They started dating. Winger stayed at the governor's mansion. His staff reportedly begged him to either marry her or ask her to leave, convinced Nebraska voters would be outraged. A local newspaper ran an actual poll. 76% said it was fine. 12% said it wasn't. The remaining 12% apparently had strong feelings about celebrity-politician romances in the Great Plains. Winger was later stopped for speeding in Kerry's state-issued Lincoln Continental, 51 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone, expired California license. The story made national papers. His chief of staff issued a formal policy statement restricting who could drive the governor's car. Local donors raised $300 to buy Winger a used 1976 Chevy station wagon from a dealer called Weird Wally. The car was donated to a home for troubled girls. When reporters pressed Kerry on the romance, he said, "What can I say? She swept me off my foot." He was referring to the fact that part of his foot was gone. Carey later served 2 terms as U.S. Senator and ran for president in 1992. Political analysts in Nebraska still mention her name in his biography. She was filming a movie about a mother and a daughter the whole time. Number 3. The role Burt Reynolds regretted forever. Brooks wrote Garrett Breedlove specifically for Reynolds, a charming, slightly past-it rogue who could match MacLaine without overshadowing her. Reynolds loved the script, but he'd made a verbal commitment to his friend and collaborator, Hal Needham. The film was Stroker Ace. Reynolds later said, "When it came time to choose between Terms and Stroker, I chose the latter because I felt I owed Hal more than I did Jim." In a separate interview, "The stupidest thing I ever did was turn down Terms of Endearment." On Larry King Live in 1985, "There are no awards in Hollywood for being an idiot." Stroker Ace earned 5 Razzie nominations. Nicholson swept every major critics award that season and won the Oscar. Reynolds had been the #1 box office star in America for 5 consecutive years, a record matched only by Bing Crosby. The year he chose Stroker Ace, he dropped from #1 to number 38 in the annual box office poll. He said, "That's where I lost them." By the mid-1990s, he was making straight-to-video films. He filed for bankruptcy in 1996. He was back on his feet by the end of the decade. Boogie Nights in 1997 gave him a career second act. But the original run, the Burt Reynolds, who was the biggest star in America, never came back. He chose a friend over an Oscar. Hollywood doesn't have a category for that. Turns out it also doesn't forgive it. Number 2. The role nobody wanted became Nicholson's Oscar. After Reynolds said no, Harrison Ford said no, Paul Newman said no, Brooks was stuck. Then Winger, in the middle of the most chaotic shoot of her career, sent the screenplay to her friend Jack Nicholson. Nicholson read it over a weekend. He told Roger Ebert he rarely encountered a role where he could say, the way he had with Easy Rider, "Yeah, sure, I could play that guy." The script made him cry. Nicholson had been away from Hollywood for a year and a half. He accepted third billing, behind Winger and MacLaine, for a supporting role in a film about 2 women, specifically to prove he still had what he called his chops. To prepare, he called Russell Schweikert, a former high school friend who had actually been to space, and asked him how an astronaut handles getting older. He wanted to play a man in midlife who wasn't in crisis, someone the audience hadn't seen before. He swept every critics' award. He won the Academy Award. The woman who made that set miserable every day, who would sit at the Oscars holding an imaginary statue, who would quit the industry 12 years later, is the reason this film has its most beloved character. She didn't plan it. She called a friend with a good script. Without that call, there is no Garrett Breedlove. Number 1. The movie's most beloved character didn't exist. Larry McMurtry called Terms of Endearment his personal favorite among all his novels. He had written it in 1975 and considered the last 60 pages some of the best work he'd ever done. McMurtry had a reputation for disliking what Hollywood did to his books, complicated feelings about HUD, about The Last Picture Show. He never said that about Terms of Endearment. Garrett Breedlove is not in a single one of those pages, not one word. McMurtry's Aurora had a rotating cast of older suitors, stable, cautious men who worked fine on the page. Brooks read that and knew it wouldn't survive the screen. He needed a counterweight, someone who could match MacLaine's energy, someone unpredictable. He set Garrett in Houston because, as Brooks said, that's astronaut central. And here's what it took to get him there. Brooks wrote the role for Burt Reynolds. Reynolds chose Stroker Ace. Harrison Ford said no. Paul Newman said no. Debra Winger called Jack Nicholson. Nicholson came back from 18 months away and took third billing. He won the Oscar. He changed what the film was. The most decorated film of 1983, the one that made you think of your mother or your daughter or both, has at its center a character who was invented for the wrong actor, rejected by 3 more, and delivered by accident through a phone call from a woman who was miserable making it. And the man who wrote the novel it was supposedly based on watched a character who didn't belong to him become the thing everyone remembers. He never said a word against it. That's either grace or devastation, probably both. And there you have it, 15 facts about Terms of Endearment. Which one hit hardest? The imaginary Oscar, the zombie nurse, the MacLaine quote, or the phone call that saved everything? Let us know in the comments. and tell us which film we should wade into next. Like and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss the next one. Until next time.